Hello everyone. As you can see from the title, this is an Elden Ring lore/theory video, and it is my first. This is indeed a variety channel. Now, I don't want to be annoying with a long intro. I will talk about all of that at the end of the video, so let's just get into it. So who is Messmer? It has almost 99% been confirmed by now that he is Marika's son, and his red hair suggests that Radagon is his father. But what is his story? And is miquella looking for him, or is he just someone standing in his path? Before we go further, I want to point out that all of this is just my speculation, and opinions will change the more we learn about the DLC, story, and lore. So, my current assumption is that Messmer is Marika's exiled son. Because when the DLC was released, we were given a short description of the Lands of Shadow and what they are, what their significance is, so on and so forth. They explicitly mentioned that this was the first land Queen Marika set foot in. In other words, this is where her reign began. Now, we should realise that all we know about Marika's history is in the Lands Between. For example, Godfrey was her first Elden Lord in the Lands Between. We don't know who she was involved with before then and what transpired in the Lands of Shadow, where apparently her reign began, or even when she was an Empyrean. I like to think that Radagon and her were likely involved from way before they came to the Lands Between and had a son in secret. Or something that is much more likely is he's probably an offshoot or a byproduct of when the two of them merged. That is, if they weren't one being always to begin with. Of course, I don't know how merging works in the world of Elden Ring, but I like to think of it as a literal merging with another. Like how when a man and a woman have intercourse, they are connected, merged in a way to create new life. And just the same way, if Marika and Radagon merged, albeit literally, Messmer could have been born from that process. We should also keep in mind that these are divine beings. Marika was a goddess, and there seems to be more to Radagon than meets the eye. And I say that Radagon is his own person because he seems to have his own history. He was a great champion of the Golden Order, who famously despised his red hair, and it is heavily implied that he either had fire giant blood, or it is more likely that he hated his red hair because it was more identical to those who had the power to burn the Erdtree. A symbol of the Order, Radagon was a staunch believer of. I really believe that he decided to merge with Marika because he thought he'd be able to better serve the greater will with the Queen, who was the vessel of its holy relic. He was the champion of the Golden Order, after all, and Marika clearly calls him a leal hound, which means, to put it bluntly, he was as loyal as a dog. Radagon likely believed that Marika had only the best intentions in mind for the Golden Order. After all, it was because of the greater will she was made a god at all. I believe Messmer could very well have been their first child, or at least one of the first. We know that Radagon was serving the Golden Order since way before he actually married Marika, as he was the one who led the assault on the Carians, where he met Rennala, decided to marry her, and have children. A decision which was very likely influenced by Marika. We have been told by Enya that the demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika, which can only mean that Radagon and Marika were one when they had children with Rennala. There is scarce information of a serpent deity that once resided in Mount Gelmir, but there is some information. After all, Rykard is all about the slithering beast, and I very much believe he was looking for this god, but ended up finding the god-devouring serpent instead. Now, I'm not going to talk too much on this because I'm afraid this is very hard lore to find. And to be quite honest, I'm a little afraid because I don't want to get facts wrong. But I think the reason this lore is hard to find and very little exists of it is because Messmer might just be the serpent deity that resided on Mount Gelmir. Rykard was against the Golden Order, and I speculate so was Messmer. Which is why I said in the beginning of this video, he was exiled. Serpents are known to be in direct opposition to the Erdtree, and this has been since way before Rykard ever became associated with them. And we have no idea why. They are hated and shunned, and we have no idea why that is. Almost as if the reason why was stripped from the records. As if people didn't want others to remember. If you recall, in one of Marika's echoes, she's talking to her demigod children, and she says, "Hear me, demigods, my children beloved. Make of thyselves that which ye desire, be it a lord, be it a god. But should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices." So, I think Messmer did make something of himself, a god, in fact, and believed he could stand in opposition of the Erdtree, become the ruler supreme. And I'm probably pulling stuff out of my arse at this point, but he has a bit of a rebelliousness to him, doesn't he? He has a Loki-ness about him. And another thing I wanted to point out is he has yellow slitted eyes, which at first I thought were just the golden eyes of the Numen. But I realised that it's a clear sign of dragon communion. Which we must remember that dragons were huge enemies of the Golden Order in the beginning of Marika's reign. For a long time, actually. So just the fact that he was participating in dragon communion would have made him an outcast. Even in his mother's eyes, whom he probably wanted to impress, so that she sees him as a worthy enough demigod. Marika doesn't really seem like someone who cares too much about her kids. I mean, she had so many of them. Like those sacrificed in the Wandering Mausoleums and many others who were killed right after Godwyn died on the Night of Black Knives. But she only seemed sad about Godwyn, so she clearly had favourites. But because of that, Marika probably grew tired and began to dislike Messmer for the path he was going down, perhaps ruining her plans or the image she was trying to maintain with the Golden Order, much like how Rykard was shunned for seeking out the serpent and decided to rebel against his mother's order. My assumption is Messmer was captured by his mother's forces, and instead of being killed or sacrificed, as his mother previously stated, he was exiled, his powers and strength being put to use in another land where he would serve his punishment by killing those robbed of the grace of gold. The man seems like he has a reputation, and a fearsome one in that. He is called Messmer the Impaler, after all. Now, I don't know if that's the title he always had, or he earned it when he came to the Lands of Shadow, but he seems far too skilled and powerful to just be sacrificed, hence Marika is using him to get rid of useless Tarnished in the Lands of Shadow. Now, I believe Marika is capable of doing such a thing because she made Godfrey, her first Elden Lord in the Lands Between, win countless wars for her, but then stripped him of the grace of gold when his purpose was done. And she made Malekith, who is supposedly her quote-unquote half-brother, seal away destined death, basically within himself, which is a horrid fate. And these are beings or people who served the Golden Order. So why in the world would she not have a worse fate for someone who clearly went against it? I believe he is continuing his punishment when we meet him in the DLC. He sees us as being stripped of the grace of gold because the influence of the greater will more or less no longer exists. We have established an entirely new order, but Messmer probably doesn't know that. Even if he does, what does it matter? He's likely lost his mind, and being alone for an eternity will do that to anybody.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
I find Messmer's dialogue really funny, actually. I love the way the actor delivers it. It sounds so mocking, almost as if he's saying, "You made this dude Lord? He doesn't even have grace. Like, you turned me away, but you made this guy Lord?" Like, I don't know, man. He seems to despise his mother, but there is a clear reverence there as well. Especially seeing as how there's a statue of a woman behind his throne cradling a baby who very much looks like Marika, and the child is probably Messmer himself. And this seems like a clear sign of him missing his mother, but at the same time he feels resentful of what he has now become or has been made to become. It really is quite sad when you think about it, and knowing Miyazaki, he loves sad, heart-wrenching stories. Now, apart from that, I don't have a lot more to say on Messmer. I'm sure there's plenty more that can be speculated, but this is just my theory. Just kind of giving him a backstory on how I think the entire Messmer storyline is going to play out. Just the thing is, he looks far too heretical to be serving his mother of his own free will, so I definitely think there's like a villain arc going there. I really think he is being controlled by his mother. He's under some sort of spell or punishment, much like how the fire giant was. So yeah, he just seems like the root of everything that stands against the Erdtree, and I'm curious to see how right or wrong I truly am when the DLC actually drops. I did leave out some points which seem less likely, and I'm sure there are so many other lore sleuths on YouTube who will do a much better job than I did in this video. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this is the first time I've spoken in any work of mine, and this is my first ever lore theory video in general, so I'd love some thoughts on that. It isn't really my style, but I want to get into making things like this more often, where I can share my thoughts or ideas with the respective community. I really wanted to share my theories since I adore the Elden Ring universe, and I was very proud of what I came up with. I'm really excited for the DLC since miquella is one of my favourite characters in the game, simply because of how enigmatic he is and the mystery that seems to surround him every time someone speaks of him. I'm so glad that the DLC is expanding more on his story, and I'm hoping we'll fill in some gaps of the lore while answering some questions and also leaving us with many, many more. I will list some videos I watched prior to making my own, which I'm sure many of you have already seen, but they are amazing nonetheless. I might be back with more content like this in the future, but until then, take care and good hunting.